Alright, let's get this cabinet put in tonight. Make sure you got your coating in there on the inside. Make sure that is all coated, no bare steel showing. Next thing you got to remember, after you get the insulation in, make sure you put your thick washer on those 4 screws right there, and then you'll have another 2 that will glue in where the locking tab is. So let's get started, and I'll get the camera down here and we're gonna put some insulation in there. I always cut it a little bit long. We'll put the base in first on the back. Get it nice and tight in there. And now we'll do the outside perimeter. Fit these corners pretty good. That way when you stick your cabinet in there, it doesn't hang up on the edge going in. Using an R13, and I'll probably take a bag, one bag, which is 40 square feet. Take a bag to do the cabinet and the main door. Maybe not quite, but it's gonna be close. And then your base. Get it all tucked in really nice. All right, now you'll have a fiber washer that goes on to your cabinet, where your cabinet drops in there. If you don't do this, you drop your cabinet in and your alignment is off. That's what you forgot. Your next 2 you will be gluing in. They'll go right there. We won't be needing them until we put the lock in, obviously, but they need to be there so when the panel goes down on there, it does not cause it, when we tighten the bolts up, it doesn't cause it to fold it in. It needs that for strength. So let's get the cabinet and let's get these glued in next. I usually just use some gasket adhesive, something to hold it in place, because it's just going to be sitting there. It doesn't hang on anything. And that's just some weather strip adhesive is all it is. Put a little dot on there just to hold it in place. Once the bolts go in there, they're not going anywhere, but it's going to be a bit before we get the bolts in there. Make sure it lines up just like so. All right, so make sure you got your side molding strips on. Make sure you got those in. You got obviously your insulation. Your drain tube will go in later before you put the cabinet in, so your cabinet slides in nicely. Take you some tape, and I do this on every machine with the cabinet. It will help that cabinet to slide in without pushing your insulation down. So we'll set the cabinet in. We'll try to set it all in one shot. If you're by yourself, it's a little bit of a problem. If you got somebody helping you, it'll help a little bit. I always start at the top, kind of get some things lined up, and it sometimes will start going in itself. Kind of get it in there going at the same time. If you didn't put that tape on, all your insulation would be at the bottom right now. And at this point, you're going to start getting ready to start lining it up with your bolts that are going to be coming up through the piece here. Like it's coming in there pretty good. It's looking pretty good. That is in. That's in. And as you can see, we still have a pretty good fair amount. I usually don't shove it in all the way at this point. I will put a little bit more insulation in. Start pulling your tape right now, and you'll see where your insulation is at then. Alright, so let's take a little bit of insulation and we'll fill up a few gaps. I've heard stories both ways. You don't need to be jamming it in there. I've always filled them up, never had any problem. But I try to fill the cavity up as much as I can at this point. So this is the time to do it. But after you tighten that down, you're not going to be able to get anything in there once you tighten this cabinet down. Our next step, obviously, will be putting the drain tube in. So if you're with us, don't know how it'll hit on the series, but tomorrow night we will get the drain tube put in, and possibly might even put the compressor in. This cabin's been powder coated. Years ago, before powder coat was around, at least around here, we used a Hammerite product, or some people might have used an acrylic enamel product that looks like it, but I really like the powder coat. Alright, I think we got it good and tight. Go ahead and get our bolts in. Get bolted in. Make sure those two washers are in place, like so. Alright, you'll have kind of a felt washer that goes on before you put the nuts out. So it's got kind of a fiber washer. Probably for vibration, keeps it not a rattle to it. There'll be a fascia board that goes over the top of this, which I think we got new ones on this one. Don't tighten it all the way down that first time. Get them all kind of going in all together. And now go around, tighten them all the way down. Okay, if you haven't put your legs on yet, this would be a good time to do it. I always run a tap, and I tapped these after I took the old ones out, but we'll tap them again. Get you a little bit of spray lubricant. I've been using this fluid film. It's a rust and a corrosion protector and a lubricant. Part number is AS11. AS11 fluid film. This product works great on your bottle racks. Good lubricant. Definitely gonna last longer than your WD-40. But get it as far as I know, you can get it at got it at our local Napa Auto Parts store. There may be other places. I just stumbled across a product not too long ago. One of my accounts that I call on, he was using it. Found out it was in the Napa system. So that's a 3/8/16 is what thread these are. Check your thread in case somebody's done something, changed it on you. You want to match up to whatever your threads are on what you're putting in, obviously. All the way through. Got one more. All right. You'll probably have several choices on what you have available. I like using kind of a pedal type. It's got a little bit of wobble to it. Got a hex on the top, so you can make adjustments from outside the machine. But I've done the wheels. The wheels kind of make it stand up tall, a little taller than usual. And it causes you some issues with a little bit tipsy. So, but I've kind of went back to these and started doing these. I like the roll around ones so you can move the machine around once you get it in the house. I just don't like how tipsy they are. Kind of stands the machine up a little tall, and if somebody doesn't watch what they're doing, they will tip the machine over. On an 81, you want your machine to lean just a little bit to the drain hole side, which is to the left of the machine. So if you're making decisions on being level's all right. You just want to make sure your water's not standing inside your tank. We're ready to stand that up. It's starting to feel like a machine now. Very nice. All right, so our next piece will go in is our fascia board. But before I do the fascia board, I always like doing the drain tube. If you've never put a drain tube in, probably the old one you took out, probably gonna look like something like that. That's actually in pretty good shape. I got this one from Funtronics. As you see, the size is fairly correct on the bends, and they give you then an attachment piece that will go on the inside. So it's got a beveled edge, so it'll seat really nicely inside the machine. One thing I always have to do, and every machine is different, the distance between the coming through the bottom and the top of the cabinet is going to be a little bit different. So on this particular one, I did cut off. Whoops. I did cut off that much. So I'm not saying your machine's going to need that much off. You need to check how it sets in there. So this connection is actually going to be in between where the insulation's at. Obviously, it's going to be glued in. It's not just going to sit there. We'll glue this all in. But the trick is, I always try to be a little bit detailed so you understand why I'm cutting this off. You could put it in there and let it hang down there, but this piece would probably not mount on the bottom side of the cabinet. And I like doing this because at one point in time I stopped doing it, and then realized after one of my customers grabbed the tube and he broke the seal up here. So this kind of locks it in, so if they try to grab it, it'll keep somebody from bumping this tube. If you get them glued in pretty good, it's pretty tough to do, but it can happen. So I like to make sure that bracket gets put back in there. So we want that seat to seat fairly nicely right there. So when you're sticking this piece in there, you want that to seat really nice. I usually take my ball peen hammer, and I've already tapped this down and make sure that seats real nicely. When you buy a drain tube from Funtronics, it does give you the glue kit, and it's got 2 pouches on it. It's in epoxy, so it's got the glue and the hardener. So I kind of need that together. If your temperature is really cold when you're doing this and you've got one of these packets, get it warmed up nicely. It does set up very fast. 3 to 5 minutes is the setup time, so you don't have much time. Once you mix this together, you need to get that tube put together. We're going to work really hard on this piece right here, getting it put up from the bottom, and make sure this is to the back of the machine. So when you get that installed underneath, we'll try to get some underneath shots here, but make sure this loop does go to the back side. Don't have it out to the front side. It'll be a little awkward. It needs to go to the back side. All right, so let's get our glue going here. We've kind of squeezed this around quite a bit. We'll cut across the top here. We'll get this all pushed down. And I got a little plastic tray I'm gonna work it into. Get all the glue out of that packet. It needs to be a 50-50 mix. If you're just cutting one side of that packet, it will never set up. You need to have both those components in there. And start mixing this up. You'll see it's starting to turn colors pretty quickly. When it's all pretty well white, it's gonna be ready to go. You literally got 3 to 5 minutes to get everything put together. And if you run out, you can always go down and get some urethane epoxy. Do the same thing. It's not like this drain tube's under pressure, it's just dripping. So that is all mixed up. It's ready to go. I'm going to get my tube underneath set up first. And I always like to do on this part here, get that a good coating. So when you stick that down in there, it'll lock in tight. Something about like that. And then the rest will be on the top. So once we stick this together, we'll be ready to go here. I want to run this up from the bottom. Hopefully you can see that on camera all right. We're going to shove it up here just as high as we can get it. It should bump up to the bottom of the cabinet. I can see our glue in there, and we're going to shove this down into the housing. Make sure it's seated in there really good. And now, while we got just a little bit of chance, we'll see if we can get a camera shot underneath here so you can kind of see where that bar goes. So, looking underneath here, we'll see if we can get this set up just right so you can see something here. You want that drain tube in that direction, and this piece here will come up and we will screw that piece in just like that, and probably put it more towards the fins, about right there. So I'm not sure you're seeing that, but we'll see. So you want that little bracket that holds it into place, keeps it from moving. All right, but for now, we're gonna come up here and we're gonna get this top piece seated in. Get our glue mix going here. And I always push this up and start with the heaviest amount underneath. I want to fill that whole cavity up before I shove this down all the way around. You're going to see your glue is going to start getting thicker as we go here, which is fine. But you want to fill that whole cavity up just as much as you can. About like that. I'm pulling it down right now into the housing. Then we're going to make a last swap here as our glue is getting there. Now before this sets up, I want to get a couple screws in our bracket underneath and get it locked in. So give me just a second. If you can hit your existing holes, that is the trick. We can get it in there. Now we got one in. You want to start checking your glue up here. Looks like we're really tight already. That's great. That's what we want. We'll put our last screw in. Okay, see how our seat looks. Looking good so far. Alright, drain tube is in. Feels tight. It is sealed up here really good. Last thing you want to do on the drain tube, you want to take some plumber's putty. And the factory does this. You'll see a putty that they put underneath, and that's what we're going to do. Just use a plumber's putty. You can get it any lumber yard, any plumbing store, but it's a putty. And we're going to lock that tube underneath. So where the tube is coming through, we're going to lock that in a position, and that putty will set up pretty tight and keep everything really firm. I like to get all this locked in before that urethane locks. If you need to change anything, you can right quick. You want that drain tube then, drain catcher to lock in about like that. That way you've got your place to put your wafers yet. So give you a little bit of look there what that needs to look like. Other than that, it is ready to go. So always check the top, make sure it is nice and tight. We went from that to a brand new one. Didn't take that long. Takes a little bit of measuring, get that part done, and you're gonna be good to go. So next step, we can put our fascia pieces on. And if you feel like you didn't get enough, get you some epoxy and go around it probably one time. Let it set up a night before you put another coat on it. But you don't want it standing up too tall. You want that water to come over into that drain tube. So, but yeah, looks really good. We're ready to put the fascia boards on. First thing you got to remember, and you'll probably remember on the teardown, you will have these little spring-loaded clips. They're not kind of a clip, but they're an item that pushes that fascia board, keeps it out. So it keeps it tight in there. So those will go in. I always put the stems down, pop those into the housing here, right where we took them out originally, just like so. We'll put two up here. One there, one there, one there, one right there, one there, and one right here. We'll have some more to put in the bottom. we'll go ahead and get the top and sides put in right now. Always put the top one in first. You'll see a little notch. That's a dead giveaway on what side it needs to go onto. And your flip areas where you want to be pushing in first, get it past those, and then work on your corners. You'll have some insulation that'll always fight with you a little bit. But you should have a clip that goes in this spot right here. Your next piece will be down this side here. And remember, we'll have our lock mechanism will go in there, and we still see our spacers are still there. They got glued in, still holding up real nicely. And I think, if I remember right, there's only one way, just like that. Only one way it'll go in, in order for your lock mechanism to get back in there. Just like so. Should be a good fitment there. Wipe that off a little bit. Before you get this left side put on, make sure you get those clips that we took off before we sent to the powder coater. Make sure you get those on, because you will not get your rack to bolt up without those on there. And I just about missed it myself. All of a sudden I looked up and I'm like, uh-oh, you got back up here just a bit. So, pretty easy to put on. Okay, so you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you look at your front face plate on your bottle rack, you should have those 6 that will screw into that. So now, we can put that front cover piece on here. That looks a lot better. Let's put that left side on now. Like so. Your bottom piece is screwed on. It's got pre-drilled holes in your, if you bought a new set, they're already ready to go. If you're using your old one, I usually use it. If you're gonna clean those up, use a flat black. Kind of matches what the factory did that year. Just about all those face plates are all in kind of a satin look. We're just going to stick this in there for now. I'm not going to finish this off yet, but we're going to at least get it in the housing. Kind of see how everything looks seated wise. And there's the front and back. Watch your 2 double holes over here to the right. They got to be to that side, like so. Hopefully match up to your existing holes. That is the key. But man, it's looking really, really good. I'm really proud of the machine. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, if you get a chance, take a look at everything in one of your machines. If there's one in particular that you want us to take a look at, there might be a machine that you haven't seen on our site before, hey, throw it in our comments. We're always looking for a new project. We've got some new stuff coming up this summer, but I want to thank everybody. We went over that 1,000 mark. Just been an incredible, almost 3 years in the making, but thank you. We've got everything on the cabinet fairly well finished. The front fascia is all on. The drain tube is in. We're going to show you when we get a compressor back. It comes in a kind of a container like this, all done, ready to go. If you get a box sitting here right between the compressor and that, just kind of give it a little bit of space. This one here will probably work. Give it something to sit on. Let it sit down on there just like so. Get you a towel when you get ready to slide that on that bottom piece there. Don't scratch all your paintwork up. Take that a little bit and stick one up on the top side here. Usually it's not too big of a problem. And we'll kind of start scooting it in. At this point, you can pull your rag out. And there you go. We'll get it bolted in. We got where we wanted to get to tonight. Our next step, we'll get that bolted in and we'll be moving on to the door. So hang on, we'll be right back.